So hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto snaps at Kakashi Chunin exams. Part 4. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 5, comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. And check out my playlist. So let's start the video. 3 people and 1 pig sat at a table in a small town near the northeastern border of the Land of Fire. 2 women and 1 man drank in silence as the time passed, and only exchange would be a glare from one of the women. Finally, not being able to endure the silence, the sole man of the group spoke. "Tsunade, we need your help," Jiraiya said almost pleadingly. The scoff was heard from the woman named Tsunade. "Not a chance, you old toad. I told you I cut my ties with that place long ago." "Well, Konoha did not cut ties with you," Jiraiya replied seriously. "Danzo's in charge now, it won't be long until he declares you a. You think I can't handle Danzo's armies? Who do you think I am, Jiraiya? Is that really what you want?" Jiraiya asked as he took a sip of his sake. "You want to run away for the rest of your life? Better than going back to that place," Tsunade replied bitterly. "You know how much that village has taken from me." "Yes, I know," Jiraiya sighed. "But those 2 would never want your life to end up like this." A fierce glare was sent in his direction. "What the hell do you know? I knew them well enough to know they would never want someone they loved to end up like a coward," Jiraiya said heatedly. "You knew what their dream was, didn't you?" "Yes, I did," Tsunade replied, her glare still ready. "And look what that led them to. So you would let their sacrifice be in vain?" Jiraiya asked. "Sensei's as well. Better than to go to war we cannot win," Tsunade said with finality. "Do you think you and that brat of yours can do anything against Danzo?" "Yes," Jiraiya replied firmly. "Naruto knows how to end the root from the inside and find evidence that will turn the village against Danzo. And what is worth that brat of yours? He's just some snot-nosed genin who barely got his forehead protector," but Jiraiya corrected. "And he's damn strong. He beat the Shukaku by himself and I already have him trained on the Rasengan." "Rasengan?" Tsunade asked with a mild surprise. "Why would you teach him that?" "Well, it is his father's technique, after all." The gasp was heard from both women. "Why, you couldn't mean?" Tsunade whispered in shock. Jiraiya nodded. "Yes, I do. Naruto, or should I say Uzumaki Naruto, is the son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina." "Hey Kushina?" Tsunade brought her hand to her mouth in shock. "How?" "After the Kyuubi attacked and Minato sealed him, a child was found." "Their child," Jiraiya said solemnly. "I knew they were expecting but I never knew when he was due. After I found out, I was already out of the village, but Sensei knew who that child was." I can't believe it," Tsunade said, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "If not for Konoha, would you help us at least for him?" Jiraiya asked quietly. Tsunade stayed silent for a minute. "I'll think about it." "Alright," Jiraiya said as he stood up. "I will wait at the north end of the village in the morning if you decide to come," and with that, he leaves. Silence reigned among 2 remaining women as time passed. Tsunade drank a full bottle of sake by then. Not being able to see her friend drowning in sadness and alcohol, the younger woman put a hand on her shoulder. "Tsunade-sama, what will you do?" Shizune asked quietly. Tsunade began with a sigh. "I don't know. What do you think I should do?" Shizune stayed quiet for a moment before responding. "If not for Konoha, then do it for Naruto-kun. You are his godmother after all," she finished with a sad smile. "And I'm sure Kushina-sama would love for you to be by his side." Tsunade sighed. "You really have a way with words, you know that." Shizune only smiled. They stayed at the table for a while longer, drinking and thinking before they retired for the night. 2 weeks have passed since Naruto woke up after his fight with Kabuto. He mostly stayed indoors, going out only at night and for a short amount of time. He had his training and Izumi to keep him busy so he couldn't complain. He was already in the last stage of learning Rasengan. After finally popping the water balloon, he easily figured out the second step. Overloading the rubber ball was fairly easy with the amount of chakra he had, and now he just had to combine the 2 steps to finish the technique. He managed to do it once, but he couldn't contain the ball of chakra for more than a few seconds. He also trained with his mother's Tanto. Using shadow clones, he managed to adjust his style for closer combat, moving in and out to deal damage with the blade. When he inspected the blade closer, he noticed that channeling chakra through it was much easier than through his ninjato, and he began to add both wind and lightning chakra to the blade. With wind, he gained range and extreme sharpness which could cut through most things. With lightning, he gained extreme penetration abilities as well as cutting power. Now he wanted to be able to switch from one element to the other fast so he could use it effectively in battle. His relationship with Izumi confused him though. He was sure he wasn't in love with her, but he couldn't deny that he liked her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sex with her almost every night. He knew there wouldn't be any kind of serious relationship after he left, since he was a ninja on the run while she was a hostess in a different country. If he had to name it, he would say they were friends with benefits, a term he found in Jiraiya's book. And from what he saw, she didn't seem to mind. In all honesty though, Naruto was getting restless. His training reached its peak, and the only way to improve it further would be through battles. He was also confident that he would finish the Rasengan in a few days. After that, he would have nothing to do until Jiraiya returned. Besides, as another Rasengan failed to form in his palm. Clenching his tired fist, he dropped on the floor and lied down. It was close to midday, and Izumi would soon come to bring him lunch. He would have to thank the girl a lot because he would probably go for days without eating. The sound of doors being opened caught his attention, and he turned his head expecting to see the green-eyed beauty, only to see the familiar figure of Jiraiya. "Yo," the man greeted me with a grin. "Damn it, Jiraiya, I thought you died by now," Naruto replied with a sigh as he stood up and faced the man. "Right," Jiraiya said flatly. "What if I told you that I wanted to give you more time with Izumi-chan?" Naruto blushed slightly. "How do you know about that?" Jiraiya's eyebrows rose as a grin split his face. "I didn't," he replied with a giggle as Naruto slapped his forehead. "So," Naruto began as his embarrassment faded. "Since you returned, does that mean you found who you were looking for?" "Of course," Jiraiya replied with a huff. "I'm Jiraiya-sama, the greatest spy in elemental nations. There is no one I can't find." "Who was it?" "You'll meet her soon," was Jiraiya's reply. "Now pack your stuff and say your goodbyes. We're leaving." "I'll be ready in 5 minutes," Naruto said as he approached the door. "I'll be waiting on the roof," Jiraiya replied and disappeared. Naruto shook his head with a chuckle as he entered the room he shared with Izumi. His pouches were on the desk so he strapped them on, as well as the tanto on his lower back. Then he put his sandals on and turned to leave only to see Izumi standing at the door. She smiled at him as he approached her and wrapped her arms around him in a gentle hug. "Safe travels, Naruto-kun." Her gentle voice calmed him and he wrapped his arms around her shoulders. "Thank you, Izumi-san." The beauty giggled. "I told you not to call me that, Naruto-kun. I'm not that old." Naruto laughed slightly. "Alright, Izumi-chan." Izumi pulled back and smiled at the blonde before kissing him softly on the cheek. "Goodbye, Naruto-kun." "Goodbye," he replied, and they separated. Naruto then left the room and went to the roof. Jiraiya looked at Naruto as he appeared by his side and nodded. The blonde returned the nod and they both disappeared with a shunshin. They reappeared in a forest outside the town, hidden by the dense trees. Naruto then looked at the bigger man. "So when will I meet this mysterious woman you took so long to locate?" he asked. Jiraiya snorted and pointed behind him. "There she is, brat." And true to his words, a woman appeared, or two to be more precise. Both very beautiful, yet very different. One was a tall woman with blonde hair set in 2 pigtails. She had brown eyes, a diamond-shaped mark on her forehead, and a pair of the biggest breasts he had ever seen in his life. The second woman was shorter, with short black hair and black eyes. Her black kimono covered her entire body, but her curves were still prominent. She also held a small pig in her arms wearing a red vest and a pearl necklace. The blonde approached him first. He had no problems watching only her face as he engraved the image of her breasts deeply in his mind. She stopped in front of him with a strange look in her eyes as she stared at his face. He raised a brow in curiosity and was about to ask her what's wrong when she spoke. "You look just like her," she said softly and Naruto's eyes widened. "You have his hair and eyes though," she let out a soft smile as she watched his shocked expression. "I'm so happy to finally meet you, Naruto." Then she did something that surprised everyone there. She hugged him. Naruto stood still in shock as a pair of strong feminine arms wrapped around his shoulders and his face was buried in a pair of soft mounds. He was even more shocked when he felt tears fall on top of his head and the woman shuddered as she choked back a sob. "I thought you died," she said quietly, her voice quivering. Naruto finally regained his composure and with some difficulty, raised his head to look at the crying woman. "Who are you?" The woman forced a laugh as she released him and wiped her tears away. "My name is Senju Tsunade. I am your godmother." Naruto's eyes widened in shock. What?" Tsunade laughed again, this time softer and less forced. "I was a good friend of your mother for a long time. I watched her grow from a feisty little girl to the strong kunoichi she was. I loved her dearly and, when she asked me to be your godmother, I was overjoyed." Her smile then turned sad. "I was away from the village before you were born. When I heard of her death, I was crushed. And I thought you died as well." "Tsunade," Naruto said softly. In just 2 weeks, his life changed greatly. He found out that his parents loved him and that he even had godparents. It was a lot to take in, honestly. I don't know what to say." Tsunade smiled softly and hugged him again and Naruto hugged her back. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I will be here for you when you need me." Naruto smiled and shut his eyes tight, preventing tears from escaping. "Thank you." The other two people stood on the side, watching the heartfelt reunion with smiles. It was a few minutes later when the pair separated and Naruto turned towards the last unknown member of the group. The black-haired beauty smiled and approached him. "It's great to finally meet you, Naruto-kun," she began. "My name is Shizune and I am Tsunade-sama's apprentice. And this is Taunton," she finished, raising the pig slightly. Naruto smiled at the two and gave them a small bow. "It's nice to meet you Shizune-san, Taunton-chan." Shizune smiled and Taunton oinked. "You don't have to be so formal, Naruto-kun. Just call me Shizune." Naruto nodded with a smile. A cough was then heard from Jiraiya and all turned to face him. "Now that we're all well acquainted, it's time to discuss important matters," he said seriously. "Of course," Tsunade said. "As much as I would love to spend some time with my godson, I hear he got himself in quite a bit of trouble." She finished, giving Naruto a pointed look. Naruto huffed. "Not my fault." Jiraiya chuckled. "Be that as it may, you are in trouble now, so we have to plan ahead." "So what now?" Naruto asked. "Now, we train," Jiraiya replied. "Tsunade and Shizune will return to Konoha and be our inside informants while the two of us go somewhere else. Is that safe?" Naruto asked with concern in his eyes. "Don't worry, brat," Jiraiya replied. "Tsunade can take care of herself and, now that she will go back willingly, there won't be any problems. Won't Danzo be suspicious though?" "Oh, you bet your ass he will," Jiraiya chuckled. "That bastard will have his men watch her every move for a while, but he can't outright hurt her for no reason." Naruto nodded. "What about us? We are going to the land of water or more specifically, Kurigakure." "What?" Naruto asked in slight shock, feelings shared by the women as well. "They are in the middle of a civil war now. What could we possibly gain from going there?" "I know that, brat. We are going there to help the rebels win the war," Jiraiya replied. "And we have much to gain. You'll get battle experience which is more valuable than any training and we can possibly get some allies in the long run. And they will welcome us with open arms." Naruto asked skeptically. "Not us, you," Jiraiya replied pointing at him. "I'll have to leave you there since I can't let Danzo find out I'm with you, it'll break my cover and possibly Tsunade's. Besides I have a lead on a dangerous organization I need to check out." "Are you sure this is safe?" Naruto asked, this time with worry in his voice. "Don't worry," Jiraiya ruffled his hair. "I know you can take care of yourself." Naruto sighed and moved the man's hand off his head. "What about my training?" "Sure, the experience is necessary, but it's not enough. I'll leave you a scroll with some techniques and give you some pointers as well," Jiraiya replied. "You won't stagnate, trust me." "Fine," Naruto said. "Are we leaving immediately?" "Yeah," Jiraiya said. "I wish I could give you two some more time to talk, but Tsunade has to get back to the village before Danzo sends his men after her." "Don't worry, Naru-chan," Tsunade said, seeing the sad look in his eyes. "We'll have a drink after you return to the village." Naruto looked at her in annoyance at the name before smiling slightly. "Sure. Well then," Jiraiya began. "Let's go." Without any more words, four shinobi jumped to the trees and headed south. Danzo sat in his chair as his hand gripped the report he was holding. It has been over 2 weeks now and there was no sign of Naruto anywhere. He had sent out the best tracking teams in Konoha and none of them found anything. He still cursed Orochimaru for failing. He had another trouble on his mind however. It was time to deal with Tsunade as he couldn't allow her to wander around anymore. She was an important pawn in this game, being the strongest kunoichi in Konoha. Danzo would give her one chance to come willingly. If she refused, she would be branded as and hunted down. "Fu," he said suddenly and a single ninja appeared before him. "Take a team and locate Senju Tsunade and bring her back. Hiruzen may have given her leniency, but I will not. If she refuses, you have permission to take her down." "As you command, Danzo-sama," Fu replied emotionlessly and disappeared. With the task given, Danzo returned to his thinking. He was already planning on invading some smaller countries, but it was still too early to set those plans to motion. Now he had to strengthen his forces to show that Konoha was still strong even without them. When Naruto was found however, all of his plans could begin. Team 7 walked through the gates of Konoha after their mission. With Naruto's absence, they were given another member, Sai. The boy was a capable shinobi although his social skills were terrible. The moment he met the team, he gave them weird nicknames and basically insulted them. His presence wasn't the only change in the team. When Naruto left, Kakashi began to seriously train his 2 remaining students, focusing on their weaknesses as well as strengths. He gave Sakura training in endurance and, well, Sasuke trained with and without his Sharingan. The 2 genin also changed a lot. Sakura was a lot quieter and she began to take her training seriously. She also stopped pestering Sasuke and spent her free time in the library, reading about any possible skills she found useful, as well as finding out as much as possible about the world beyond the walls of Konoha. Sasuke changed the most though. After Kakashi put him in his place, his attitude changed completely. He no longer belittled his peers and tried to be cordial with them when they crossed paths. He was still asocial and didn't seek friendship, but he acknowledged people around him. Kakashi could honestly say that he was proud of them. In a way, Naruto's disappearance made them better even if the price was high. He sighed as he thought about his former student. He didn't believe he was a traitor and was glad his students thought the same. He wished he could talk to him and find out the truth, but that was impossible. All he could do now was do his best as a sensei and wait. When Jiraiya returned to the village, he would be sure to talk to him. 4 figures could be seen running across the trees of the Land of Fire. The plan was to travel together for a while before they would split so they could talk about the plan more. Currently, they were just east of Odafukugai in a large clearing where they stopped to rest. It was the final point before they went separate ways. "Take care of yourself, Naruto," Tsunade said as she gave the blonde a gentle hug. "You too," Naruto replied as he returned it. The two then separated and Naruto went to stand by Jiraiya. "You know the plan, Tsunade," Jiraiya said, and Tsunade gave him a nod. "Now all that's left is..." His speech was cut short as they all had to dodge a hail of shuriken heading their way. The 4 shinobi went into battle stances as they scanned their surroundings for the location of the enemy. They didn't have to look for long as 2 figures appeared. A tall man with blue skin and a huge sword on his back and a shorter man with long black hair and a pair of Sharingan eyes. They both wore identical black cloaks with red clouds on them. "Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame," Jiraiya said warily as he stared the 2 down. Other 3 tensed immediately as they knew who these 2 were. Kisame grinned. "Glad to know we're known around, Itachi." Itachi said nothing as he merely stared at Naruto. The Bond was unnerved at the stare and he could feel something trying to invade his mind. Pulsing out his chakra, he cancelled and lowered his gaze. "Don't look in his eyes," he said seriously. "Looks like the brat is smarter than he looks," Kisame said mockingly. "Indeed," Itachi replied stoically. "What do 2 S-rank shinobi such as yourselves want with us?" Jiraiya asked dangerously. If these 2 were here, the fight was unavoidable. Such criminals did not appear for idle chit-chat. "We care for none of you," Itachi said. "It's Naruto-kun that is our target." "Oh really?" Jiraiya asked. "And why is that?" "It is none of your concern," Itachi said. "If you would be so kind and allow us to take him, we do not have to fight." The scoff was hard. "Yeah right. I guess we have to fight then huh?" Tsunade asked. Itachi glanced at the woman for a moment. "Kisame, take her out." Kisame didn't wait for even a second after he heard that and charged at the woman with a manic grin. He appeared in front of her in a second with, swinging a kunai. The group tensed and went to help her, but before they could even take a step, Kisame was back by Itachi's side. "Worked as a charm," Kisame said with a grin, and everyone looked at Tsunade. The woman in question was shaking uncontrollably and her face was covered in drops of blood. Jiraiya watched her in shock before looking at Kisame. Blood dripped from his left hand and Jiraiya realized that the kunai wasn't heading for Tsunade at all. "What's wrong with her?" Naruto asked in slight panic after seeing the strongest woman in the world shivering like a leaf on the water. "She's afraid of blood," Jiraiya replied curtly. "Shizune stayed back and took care of her." "Are you sure, Jiraiya-sama?" Shizune asked. Jiraiya nodded. "We'll be fine." Shizune gave him an unsure nod and grabbed her mentor before jumping away from them. The 2 ninja now looked at their opponents. "So how do you want to do this, kid?" Jiraiya asked the boy at his side. He wanted to see how analytical Naruto's mind was. "I'll take the big guy," Naruto said looking at Kisame. "He is a straightforward fighter who uses his sword and water ninjutsu. I can counter him with my..." On the other hand, he glanced at Itachi briefly, careful not to look in his eyes. "I have no experience in fighting against Sharingan and I'm not much against it." Jiraiya gave him a proud look before looking at his opponent. "Alright then. Be careful, Naruto. Kisame is an extremely strong shinobi." "Yeah, I know," Naruto replied looking at the grinning Kisame. "It seems you ladies finally reached some consensus," Kisame said mockingly. "Shall we dance?" He finished and gripped his sword before charging at them. Naruto quickly unsheathed his tanto and met his charge head-on. 2 weapons clashed and Naruto thought his arm would break. Kisame had the strength of a rhino and it took everything Naruto had not to drop on the ground. With a roar, Naruto pushed his tanto forward and deflected the giant sword before spinning and shooting a roundhouse kick to Kisame's head. It failed however as Kisame lifted his arm and blocked the kick. "That stung a bit," the blue-skinned man said and Naruto quickly jumped away to avoid the weapon heading for his head. "Then I'll make sure it stings even more," Naruto replied and lightning chakra coated his arms and legs as well as his tanto. Kisame only grinned. "Bring it on, kid." And the 2 charged again. Jiraiya and Itachi took a calmer approach to a battle as they stared each other down. First move was always critical in a fight. It would make it or break it and only those of highest skill could salvage a failed first attack. Jiraiya considered his options as he remembered everything he knew about Itachi. The Uchiha was all around a perfect fighter. His taijutsu was great and his ninjutsu as well as was on a whole different level as befitting of an Uchiha. It was a slight twitch of Itachi's hand that warned him, and Jiraiya quickly spun around with a kunai in his hand to block the blade of Itachi's clone. With a strong kick, he dispelled the clone, but couldn't rest as he had to block another attack from the real Itachi. Itachi didn't give him a chance to retaliate though as a stream of fire escaped from his mouth. Jiraiya quickly used Kawarimi to evade the attack and appeared behind the Uchiha. Itachi jumped in the air to avoid a kunai to his neck and spun around to send a hail of kunai at the Sannin to prevent him from attacking while he was in the air. Landing a safe distance away, Itachi sent a ball of fire from his mouth right at Jiraiya, who slammed his hands on the ground and a wall of dense mud rose to protect him. As the fire died out, Jiraiya channeled chakra to his right arm and punched the mud wall. Blocks of hardened mud were sent at Itachi at high speed, promising heavy damage if they hit. Itachi predicted the trajectories of the blocks with his Sharingan and evaded them all the while making a set of hand seals. The large dragon made of fire escaped his mouth and flew at Jiraiya, who spewed a wall of water from his mouth. The two techniques met with a loud explosion, and the area around Jiraiya was enveloped with steam. Itachi carefully scanned his surroundings, but he quickly had to jump in the air to avoid a pair of hands that tried to pull him underground. He wasn't given any time to rest as Jiraiya burst out of the ground and sent a ball of fire at him. Itachi was enveloped in fire instantly. Jiraiya was still on high alert which proved beneficial as he managed to block a kunai that would have sliced his neck. Itachi's cloak was slightly singed but, other than that, he was unharmed. Jiraiya quickly sent chakra to his hair and his ponytail grew in length to wrap around Itachi. The Uchiha pushed his kunai forward making Jiraiya take a step back and jumped away to avoid the attack. He threw several kunai at Jiraiya, which multiplied in dozens, and the Sannin manipulated his hair to wrap around him in a protective cocoon. The kunai bounced off the hardened hair and fell to the ground, and Itachi sent another fireball at Jiraiya. Jiraiya had no time to dodge, and this time he was enveloped in fire, his only defense was his hardened hair. It wasn't much, but it was still enough to protect him while he charged through the inferno at Itachi. His clothes smoked at the hems and his wild hair flayed around, flying at Itachi again. Itachi scoffed and evaded, but that gave Jiraiya a split-second opening. Not stopping his charge, Jiraiya channeled chakra in his right hand and a blue ball of dense, spiraling chakra formed. He extended his hand forward, aiming for Itachi's ribs. The Uchiha's eyes widened and, thanks to all of his hard-earned battle experience, he managed to avoid a broken ribsage by a hair. He didn't evade it completely though and he was sent flying. Idich managed to catch himself in the air and land on his feet, but his hand still went to clutch his ribs. He could feel at least two broken from the attack. Had the Rasengan hit fully, his ribs would be crushed and he would most likely die. Sparing a moment to wipe a trail of blood off his mouth, he gazed at his opponent. "You are as strong as they say, Jiraiya-sama," Itachi said stoically. "You are truly a terrifying opponent." Jiraiya knew his opponent was just fishing for time, but did not try to attack as he also needed a moment to rest. It was quite some time since his last high-level fight. "I can say the same thing about you, Itachi," Jiraiya said. "So much power yet you are so young. I'm afraid that this fight won't go anywhere if we keep on like this," Itachi said as his Sharingan started to spin. "How about we raise the stakes?" Jiraiya grinned. "Oh, I was hoping you would say that." Naruto parried another swing of Kisam's sword to the side and raised his lightning-coated leg to land a strong kick to the man's face. This time, Kisam didn't block as he knew the lightning chakra would most likely paralyze his arm. He leaned his head back, avoiding the kick, and swung his sword back to catch the offending leg. Naruto saw the action and quickly diverted his leg towards the sword. The leg and the sword met with a loud bang, and Naruto kicked off the sword, spinning around with the added momentum, to kick Kisam's ribs. Kisam grunted in annoyance and jumped away to evade before thrusting his sword forward and charging. Naruto, still in the spinning motion, bent his stationary leg in a crouch to let the sword pass over his head before clashing his tanto against the offending weapon and sending it to the air. Using the created opening, he pointed his tanto at his opponent and thrust it towards the man. Kisam saw the sharp blade heading for his heart and quickly kicked Naruto's hand, making him lose the grip on his tanto. The tanto slipped out of his hand and stabbed the ground several feet away. With his weapon lost, Naruto jumped away to gain some distance. "You're pretty good for a brat," Kisam said while grinning as he leaned his sword on his shoulder. "And you're pretty good for a fish," Naruto replied with his own grin. Kisam's grin took on a malicious glint. "Oh, I will enjoy shredding you apart," he said as he pointed his sword at the blonde. "I'd like to see you try," Naruto said with a smirk. Kisam reacted immediately as he spun around to slice Naruto's shadow clone in two, leaving his back to Naruto. That opening was all the original needed as his hands flashed through hand seals and a beam of lightning flew from his mouth straight at Kisam. The bigger man saw the beam from the corner of his eye and smirked. It was a good strategy. Not good enough though. Naruto watched in shock as Kisam's raised sword absorbed his lightning beam in mere seconds. What more, he could swear he heard the sword groan in delight, as if it just had a pleasant meal. His eyes shifted back to Kisam's grinning face. "What the hell was that?" Naruto asked. "Like it?" Kisam asked with a chuckle. "This is Samahata. It absorbs chakra. And shreds," he added as the bandages covering the sword were ripped apart. Naruto could now see the sword in its full glory of blue spikes. "I think we played enough, don't you?" With that, he charged at Naruto again. Naruto barely managed to dodge a swipe that would rip his head off and backflip away to avoid a kick to his chin. Making 2 shadow clones, Naruto's hands flashed through hand seals as the clones charged at Kisam. The clones were instantly destroyed, but they gave the original enough time to complete his technique. Taking a deep breath, Naruto blew a strong gust of wind at his opponent. Kisam raised his sword to protect himself from the attack, but he could do nothing as the small wind blades cut up his arms and legs. As the attack ended, Kisam lowered his sword only to notice that Naruto wasn't where he was before. Sharpening his senses, he barely turned around to block an attack from behind. While Kisam was distracted by Naruto's previous attack, the blonde snatched his tanto out of the ground and attacked the man from behind. His surprise attack failed, and now he was pushing his weapon against the much larger sword with all his might. His teeth clenched as Kisam began to overpower him, and with a roar of defiance he pushed harder. Then, bright light engulfed them. Shizune watched with wide eyes as 2 battles raged in front of her. She knew Jiraiya was strong, and he could match Itachi easily, but she never expected Naruto to be able to fight against the S-ranked Kisam and survive. The boy held his ground and matched Kisam perfectly, but she knew he wasn't going all out. If he was, Naruto would probably be dead by now. Tsunade was by her side, still trembling, yet her eyes never left the blonde boy fighting in front of her. She cursed herself for her weakness that prevented her from helping him. She hated being a useless deadweight, but she could do nothing about it. The blood on her face brought all those painful memories back. And Nawaki and all the others that she couldn't save appeared before her eyes again. She watched Naruto sending a gust of wind to kiss him before attacking him from behind. Then she gasped in shock as the light appeared. At first there was nothing. Then a pained scream echoed across the clearing. Jiraiya and Itachi stopped their fight to look at the other fighting pair from where the scream came. Their eyes widened as the light died down and they could see what happened there. Naruto stood there with a weapon in his hands. It wasn't his tanto however as the small blade transformed. In his hands now was a greatsword with a straight and wide blade as black as night and as long as he was tall. The blade was connected to a long handle wrapped in white tape with excess tape hanging from the pommel. And in front of him was Kisam, kneeling. And missing his left arm. The spectators watched in shock as Kisam's arm rolled on the ground and blood poured from his shoulder. The man in question watched the stump in shock as he stopped screaming, barely believing what he was seeing. Naruto was shocked as well, more because of the huge weapon that appeared in his hands. Even with a bigger size, the sword was still light and he had no problem holding it up. The black blade gleamed in the sun and the blood on it looked almost purple under the sun. "Ah, it's so good to be out again. What's up Kushi-cha, who the hell are you?" Naruto watched his sword in shock as a voice appeared in his head. A voice that seemed to originate from the sword itself. The voice was surprisingly feminine and nothing like one would expect seeing the dangerous blade. He cringed slightly as the voice began to scream in his head. "Who the hell are you and why are you wielding me? Where is Kushi-chan? What the hell?" Naruto muttered quietly. The voice growled cutely, preparing for another rant when it was interrupted by a much lower and more sinister growl. Naruto looked down at his opponent and saw the murderous glare sent his way. His blood chilled as those small beady eyes locked with his, promising painful death. "You." Kisam growled at the blonde. "You bastard. You're dead." With a loud scream, Kisam rose and charged at Naruto, swinging his sword wildly. Naruto managed to block each swing with his own giant blade as Kisam seemed slower than before. His face was pale, extremely so, and each swing seemed weaker than before. Blood oozed from his stump like a river and it probably wouldn't stop anytime soon. Blocking a rather weak swing, Naruto pushed Kisam's sword aside and spun around to slice Kisam's head off his shoulders. And Kisam could do nothing to stop it. Jiraiya watched the scene unfolding with wide eyes, his battle with Itachi seemingly forgotten. He couldn't believe he would see that blade again or that Naruto could use it so easily. He also couldn't believe that Naruto had an S ranked at his mercy. So lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice his opponent rush towards his fallen teammate until it was too late. Itachi ran with all his might towards Naruto and Kisam. He appeared before them in an instant, brandishing a ninjato and using it to block Naruto's blade from decapitating his partner. No moves were wasted as he batted the larger blade aside and swung his ninjato towards Naruto. The blonde was completely and utterly unprepared for this interruption, and he could do nothing as Itachi's ninjato sliced along the right side of his face. Naruto couldn't even scream in pain as he felt his eye being sliced as Itachi stabbed the ninjato straight through his chest. Naruto's mouth opened in a silent scream as he dropped to his knees with a sword sticking out of his chest. Itachi wasted no moment as he grabbed his partner's collar and jumped on a huge crow he summoned. Just in time as a chakra-coated fist slammed into the ground where he stood only a second ago. As the bird flew away, Itachi's Sharingan clearly saw enraged Tsunade glaring at him. As the two Akatsuki members vanished, Tsunade's rage turned into intense worry as she looked at the boy behind her. Naruto was pale and on the verge of unconsciousness as blood leaked from his chest. She could also see the damage on his face as well as his eye, but she couldn't do anything about it. She had to deal with the sword wound or he would die. And she would kill herself before she let that happen. She gently laid him on the ground and swiftly pulled out the sword from his chest. Her glowing hands immediately landed on the wound, beginning the difficult process of healing. She didn't even notice as Jiraiya and Shizune appeared by her side. The only thing on her mind was Naruto and his life that hung on a thread. Megakure was one of those villages that were wounded the most during ninja wars. Since its country bordered the lands of fire, wind and earth, it was an ideal battlefield. Being a neutral ground for the three big villages, they could lash out at each other without bringing any damage to their countries. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for Aim's population. Villages were destroyed and many innocent people were killed, while Megakure lost any ninja that was caught in the crossfire. The hidden village itself was mostly undamaged, but the damage to the rest of the country weakened it greatly. It was only due to Hanzo that the village wasn't utterly destroyed. After the war, however, even Hanzo was killed by his own countrymen no less. And now Megakure was ruled by a man known as Pain. He was revered by the populace as a god with unmatched strength, and he certainly didn't dispute their claims. Currently, the orange-haired god was standing at the top floor of the tallest tower in Megakure, silently observing his village as the rain poured around him. His gaze was cold and his posture relaxed as his senses spread across the village. He was expecting a report from his two subordinates, yet none came as of yet. He wasn't worried about them, knowing their strength, but their silence was disturbing. His eyes snapped to the left as he felt them approaching at fast speed. He also noticed that one of the signatures was incredibly weak and his brow furrowed. It wasn't long before a large bird flew beside him and entered the tower as its two riders dropped on the floor. The crow dispelled, leaving a cloud of smoke, and Pain's eyebrows rose as he saw one of his strongest subordinates crippled. "Itachi, what is the meaning of this?" Pain asked stoically, his eyes on Kisam's bleeding shoulder. "Later, Pain-sama," Itachi replied. "Kisame is in need of medical assistance now." "I can see that," Pain said impassively. Zetsu takes Kisame to the infirmary and prepares an arm for him. "As you wish," a plant-like man who appeared out of the floor said. The walking abomination picked the blue swordsman up and took him to the infirmary, leaving Itachi and Pain alone. "Well?" Pain asked, although it sounded more as an order. "We located and went to test him, as per your orders," Itachi began. He was in the company of Jiraiya, Tsunade and another Kunoichi. Kisame incapacitated Tsunade immediately and he took on while I handled Jiraiya. "You expect me to believe that a genin managed to hurt Kisame to this extent?" Pain asked with a hint of a frown on his face. "Yes," Itachi replied. At first, Kisame handled him easily but, in a stroke of luck, the Uzumaki managed to cut off Kisame's arm. He also would have killed him had I not intervened. And what stroke of luck was that? The Akatsuki leader inquired. In the middle of the fight, Uzumaki's Tanto blade transformed into a broadsword, Itachi said, and Pain's eyebrows rose. The blade was in a perfect position to cut off the arm. "As I said, a stroke of luck." "I see," Pain said thoughtfully. "What of his other skills?" "Other than Kenjutsu, he showed aptness in Futen and Raiten Ninjutsu," Itachi said as he finished his report. Pain stayed silent in thought for a moment. "And this sword, do you know anything about it?" Itachi shook his head. At first, it was a simple Tanto. Even Uzumaki was surprised when it transformed. "Do you have any idea what it might be?" "It doesn't sound familiar," Pain replied, shaking his head. "No matter, it's not important. For now, you will wait for Kisame to heal before you are deployed for another mission." "As you wish, Pain-sama," Itachi replied and bowed to his leader before leaving the room. Pain silently watched the rain fall, thinking about the recent events. Having Kisame incapacitated for a longer while was not a major setback, but it still wasn't anything good. The man was a fierce fighter and could complete any mission given. His eyes snapped to the side as he felt his longtime friend approach. "It seems that the Kyuubi is stronger than we thought," an emotionless feminine voice spoken behind Pain. The man turned around and his eyes landed on his friend, a young beautiful woman with blue hair and amber eyes. Her stoic gaze belied no emotions as she looked at her friend right in the eyes. "It seems so, Conan," Pain replied just as stoically. "What would you do now, Nagato?" Conan asked. "Would you send someone else after the Kyuubi?" "No," Pain shook his head, "he's not important at the moment. After we seal the other beasts, then I will personally go after the Kyuubi." "Aren't you worried he will grow stronger in the future?" Conan asked. "It is of no importance," Pain replied stoically. "He will never be a match for a god." With that, the conversation ended and both turned to look at the falling rain. In a small town on the fire and water border, a single individual slept in a hotel. He was lying on a bed, his chest and half of his face covered in bandages. His long hair spread across the pillow as he breathed evenly. The door to his room opened and a young black-haired woman entered, moving to the bed to check up on him. Shizun's hands glowed with chakra as she checked the blonde's condition. His wounds healed nicely in the 5 days he was unconscious, and she was expecting him to wake up any time now. And just as she thought that, a single blue eye cracked open and she leaned over the blonde. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," she said softly, looking at his face. The blonde in question didn't even hear her, nor did he notice her at first, as his thoughts slowly started to drift back to the last moment he remembered, a sword being lodged in his chest. "Am I dead?" Naruto thought tiredly. His eyes finally noticed the woman above him. Who is she? Is she an angel? He thought as his eye tried to focus on the blurry image of her face. He saw her dark eyes flash in concern and her pink lips move. A single thought ran through his mind as he looked at her. She's pretty. His arms suddenly raised and he cupped the back of her head before he, much to her shock, pulled her down and kissed her. Shizun's eyes went wide as Naruto's dry lips connected with hers. He wasted no time as he pushed his tongue between her parted lips, finding hers immediately. To him, her soft lips felt heavenly and he relished in them hungrily, moving his other hand to her cheek and deepening the kiss. Shizun stood there frozen as her lips unconsciously began to move alongside Naruto's. She wanted to pull back and break the kiss, but something inside her urged her on to continue. She didn't have much experience as she traveled with Tsunade most of her life, and she had to keep her master out of trouble, which didn't leave her much time for relationships. She couldn't even remember when was the last time she kissed someone. Their kissing session was suddenly stopped when a cough resounded through the room. Shizun shot up instantly and looked at the source, her face as red as a tomato. Naruto also looked at the intruder and he saw a beautiful blonde woman with huge breasts. "Am I interrupting?" Tsunade asked in amusement, her lips quivering into a smirk. "DT Tsunade-sama." Shizun squeaked, covering her red face. "What the?" Naruto croaked out quietly as his ears finally registered the sounds around him. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his chest stopped him, and he immediately dropped back on the bed as a groan escaped his mouth. "Good morning, brat," Tsunade greeted the blonde. "Good to see you're awake." I'm not dead." He asked quietly as the busty woman moved to him and helped him drink some water from a glass by his bed. "Of course you're not dead. You had my pretty self to heal you after all," Tsunade said with a laugh as she placed the glass back on the nightstand. Then?" Naruto sputtered in reply as his eyes moved to the blushing form of Shizun. Tsunade chuckled in amusement. "It seems you had a good time making out with my apprentice, brat. Should I be worried?" Naruto soon sprouted a blush of his own. I'm sorry, Shizun-san," he said embarrassedly. "It's alright, Naruto-kun," Shizun replied, still blushing. Another bout of laughter escaped Tsunade's lips as she looked at the other two. Her laughter soon drew out another person as Jiraiya of the Sannin appeared at the doorway. "You're awake," he exclaimed as he looked at his godson. Then he noticed the blush on his face, as well as on Shizun's, and the laughing Tsunade. "What did I miss?" "Oh, nothing much," Tsunade replied, waving her hand in amusement. "Just our two students making out like teenagers." Jiraiya had a huge grin on his face as he heard that, and he patted Naruto on the back. "Good job, kid." "Shut up," Naruto rolled his shoulders to ease the stiffness in them. "So what the hell happened? Last I remember was me almost cutting that fish's head off then." His hand suddenly shot up to his face, and he felt the bandages around it. "Don't tell me." "Yeah, Itachi happened," Jiraiya replied. "I'm sorry, Naruto. I failed to stop him in time." Naruto clenched his fists as the memory of Itachi's sword flashed through his mind. "No, it was my fault. I completely disregarded my surroundings." "I'm sorry I couldn't save your eye, Naruto," Tsunade said as she put her hand on his shoulder. "It seems Itachi's sword was coated in some sort of poison that cauterized your wounds extremely fast. I had to focus on your chest wound or else you would lose much more than an eye." Naruto nodded in understanding and swung his legs over the bed before attempting to stand up. His legs almost gave out on him, but Tsunade was quick to catch him. "You shouldn't move yet," she said softly as he removed her hands off him. "I have to see," he replied and walked toward the mirror that was on the wall, unwrapping his bandages with each step. He looked at his reflection and frowned. First thing he noticed was the scar on the right side of his face. It went from above his brow and over his eye. The eye itself had a gash running straight through the iris, and the crystal blue was lost under the ugly dark coloration. His eyes then went lower and landed on a scar on his chest. His fingers idly traced both scars before he shut his eyes and clenched his fist. He slowly wrapped the bandages back around his face to hide the ugly eye before turning back to others. "How long until we leave?" "As soon as Tsunade says you're fit for traveling," Jiraiya replied. He saw that Naruto buried what he really felt now, but he didn't push him. He would talk when he was ready. We were supposed to be in the land of water by now. We also can't risk being seen by Danzo's men who are surely looking for Tsunade by now. Naruto nodded and turned to Tsunade who sighed. As much as I would love to make you stay in bed, I know I can't. Your wounds are healed by now, but you should still take it easy for a while. Alright, Naruto said and sat back on the bed. Then he noticed he was only in his boxers. Where are my clothes? And my gear? Jiraiya tossed him a bundle of clothes and his pouches. Your clothes are messed up from the fight and I don't have another set on me, he said as Naruto began to dress. And your sword is over there, he finished pointing at the weapon leaned on the wall. Fully dressed, Naruto went to his sword and picked it up. It was as light as he remembered, which was strange for a blade of its size. He also remembered a strange voice coming from it, but it was silent at the moment. Figuring it was probably his imagination, he focused on a much bigger problem at hand. How will he carry the sword around? Jiraiya noticed his problem and smirked before tossing something to the blonde. I made this for you. It's not much, but it will do the job for now. Naruto caught the object and noticed it was a strap for the sword. Strapping it around his back, he locked the sword in it and nodded. It wasn't anything special but it worked. Seeing he was ready, he turned to Jiraiya. Shall we? Jiraiya nodded. Let's go then. Tsunade, Shizune, it was nice to see you again, he smiled at the two women and left the room. Now left alone with the women, Naruto bowed. I want to thank you for everything. You saved my life. Tsunade smiled and hugged him gently. Don't mention it. Just be safe, alright. Naruto nodded as he returned the hug. The two separated and Naruto turned to Shizune. Thank you as well, Shizune-san, he said with a small blush on his face as he remembered their kiss. Shizune also had a small blush as she approached him and wrapped her arms around him. It was nothing. Be careful, Naruto-kun, she finished and tightened her hold for a moment before they separated. Sparing a small smile to both women, Naruto turned around and left the room, following after his sensei. The pair of student and teacher were currently on a trade ship which would lead them to the shores of the land of water. Both into a couple of forgettable men so as to hide themselves from Kiri's main forces. They would get off the ship when it would stop at the port on the main island before they would run the rest of the way toward the rebel camp. The rebels set the camp on the south of the main island and used the island's natural defenses to hide it. It was a good distance away from Kurigakure, surrounded by rocks and mist, so it was extremely difficult to locate. It was only because of Jiraiya's extensive spy network that the man knew where it was. Sitting inside a small two-bedroom, the two men waited patiently for their trip to end. They were traveling by sea for over a day now and it would take only a few more hours to reach the land. After a full night's rest, Jiraiya found it a good time to talk to Naruto about his training for the following time. Producing a scroll, he handed it to Naruto, who took it with a raised brow. What's this? Your training regime, Jiraiya replied. I included a book of basic and moderate as well as some of my own techniques and seals for you to practice on. By the time we meet again, I expect you to learn everything inside it. Naruto nodded and stored the scroll in his pouch. You got it. But just so you know, I'm still skeptical about this whole thing. Why would the rebels let us help them? Or train me? Because we have something they will surely want, Jiraiya said, pulling out another scroll and unsealing it. The item that appeared made Naruto's eyes widen in surprise. That's Abusa's sword, he said. Kubikirabacho. Exactly, Jiraiya said, sealing the sword back. Kakashi told me about it so I went to Wave to pick it up. Naruto sighed as he remembered his first mission out of the village. It was both physically and emotionally taxing for him and his team as they had faced hardships that they never faced before. They ended up victorious, but they were scarred for life. It was necessary though, Naruto mused. It made him grow as a shinobi. I'll trade the sword for your training, Jiraiya said. Besides, they need all the help they can get and you're practically a one-man army with your clones. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. Jiraiya's plan was sound and the probability of failing was slim. The rebels certainly couldn't let a sword as powerful as the Kubikirabacho fall into the wrong hands. The horn of the ship was suddenly heard, notifying them that the ship was about to land in the port. The two shared a serious look and packed their stuff as they prepared to leave. An hour has passed since they docked and the two were currently running south towards the rebel camp. It was getting late and the afternoon sun was slowly dimming through the island's mist. By Jiraiya's estimate, they would reach the camp very soon and Naruto was grateful for that. He needed a good sleep on the land after such a long trip. It wasn't long before the two sensed several other presences in the area and they tensed, already making plans for if the worst happened. Landing on a small clearing, the two were surrounded by 4 individuals, each wearing a Kiri forehead protector. Stop where you are, the leader of the 4 said with a commanding voice. He was a man in his 30s with blue hair and an eye patch over his right eye, wearing a green kimono. He also had a talisman hanging off his ears. State your names and purpose on this land. Jiraiya of the Sannin and Uzumaki Naruto, Jiraiya responded in a tone equally as commanding. We're here to speak to the rebel leader. The four ninja visibly tensed as they heard that. Jiraiya was well known around the world and considered one of the strongest shinobi in the world. The fact that he knew that the rebels were located somewhere around here made the situation even more grave. "Why do you want to see our leader?" the same man asked, trying to keep the composure in his voice. He knew his team did not stand a chance against Jiraiya, so attacking him was out of the question. The best course of action was to just talk it out. "That is for your leader to hear," Jiraiya replied with finality. The man sighed and nodded. It was pointless trying to find out anything from Jiraiya if the man didn't want to reveal anything. He could also just kill them and continue towards the camp, so trying to fool him was useless. That left only one option. "Follow me," he said, and the group of 6 continued to run again. It wasn't long before a large camp appeared in front of them. It was filled with tents and people were milling around, resting or training outside the camp. When the group began to walk through the camp, many saw them and tents seemed two unfamiliar people. The fact that they were walking with their second in command quelled their worries a little though. Soon they found themselves in front of the largest tent and the leader signaled the group to stay outside while he went inside to announce the newcomers. Few minutes later, he returned and motioned Naruto and Jiraiya to follow him inside. As they entered, they were met by 2 other people. One was a boy barely older than Naruto with spiky blue hair and a strange sword on his back. The other was a beautiful woman with long auburn hair and green eyes, wearing a blue battle dress. Also, neither could miss her impressively large bust. Her single revealed eye focused on the newcomers and she stood up and walked around her desk, letting her eyes roam the 2 ninja. She looked at Naruto first and noticed the bandages over his face. She also noticed he was quite young, so it was unfortunate to lose an eye at such an age. Her eye then traced his whisker marks, which she found incredibly cute and, if the situation was different, she would probably be rubbing them instantly. He was also built well for a shinobi, and his chakra level was extremely high. The second ninja however she immediately recognized. Long, white hair and the oil plate on his forehead were a dead giveaway on who the man was. Now she understood how these outsiders found them. She stopped in front of her desk and addressed the 2. "I am Terumi Mei, the leader of the rebel forces. Ao here informed me that you have something to discuss with me." "Pleasure to meet you, Terumi-san," Jiraiya began with a small bow of his head. "I am Jiraiya and this is Naruto. We have come here to offer you help with the war." Mei raised a brow. A ninja of another village wouldn't come here offering help with such a thing unless he asked for something heavy in return, she said, giving the man a suspicious glance. "So please cut to the chase." Jiraiya smirked at the woman's perceptiveness. "That is correct, but what I'm asking is training for Naruto here." Now Mei was even more confused. "Why would you want us to train him?" she asked, glancing at Naruto. "Shouldn't Konoha be the one to do it?" She immediately noticed how Naruto flinched at the mention of his village. "There were some circumstances which prevented Naruto from staying in the village," Jiraiya replied. "Why should we spare our time for him?" Mei asked. "Also, why would you even want to help us in the war?" "Because it would give him battle experience as well as a potential ally in the future," Jiraiya began. "As for why, we have something you would surely like to have in your possession." "And what would that be?" Mei asked suspiciously. "The sword of Mamachi Zabuza." The eyes of the 3 Kiri rebels widened significantly and Mei took a step back. That sword was one of the legendary 7 swords Kiri swordsmen used and having it in their possession would be invaluable. "How did you get in possession of that sword?" she asked. "Did you kill Zabuza?" "No, it wasn't me," Jiraiya replied, shaking his head. "From what I've heard, he died fighting a group of Gato's mercenaries. Naruto was on a mission with his team at the time, so he might be able to tell you more about it." Mei's eye switched to Naruto momentarily before moving back to Jiraiya. She nodded curtly. "Alright, that would be a fair trade. I will allow Naruto here to help us in the war as well as have him trained in exchange for the sword." Jiraiya grinned and pulled a scroll out of his pouch. "Excellent. I promise you won't be disappointed," he said, patting Naruto on the back. "He'll be a great help for you," he finished, placing the scroll on her desk. Mei took the scroll and unsealed its contents and, with a puff of smoke, a giant sword appeared. The Kiri ninja gazed at the sword in wonder before Mei turned to Naruto. "Alright, I'll have Chijiro take you to your tent and you will report here in the morning so we can discuss your position here," she finished motioning to the blue-haired boy wearing goggles. "Well then," Jiraiya began, patting Naruto on the back. "Be good and train hard. I'll see you in a while." Yeah, Naruto replied, waving him off. "Just don't get lost again." Jiraiya scoffed. "Shut up brat," he said before turning to Mei. "Thank you for your time, Terumi-san." Mei nodded. "Thank you for the sword, Jiraiya-san. I give you my word we will train Naruto to the best of our abilities." Jiraiya returned the nod and looked at Naruto. "Well, see you later Naruto," he said turning towards the entrance of the tent. "Yeah," Naruto said as he watched the man leave the tent. The blue-haired boy then approached him and the two left the tent as well. Now alone with his leader, Ao turned toward Mei. Are you sure this is alright? What if he is a spy? I don't think he is, Mei replied honestly. Jiraiya was never known for cunningness and it seems that the boy isn't very fond of Konoha. Besides, he could very well turn the tides of the war in our favor. Did you see his chakra level? Of course, Ao replied with a small amount of awe. He has more chakra than Yagura. Exactly. Imagine the power he could generate if he is properly trained, Mei finished. He will be monitored and we won't tell him of any operations we will start for a while just to be safe though. Ao nodded somewhat uneasily. The situation was both favorable and suspicious. Only time can tell how it will end though. Naruto and Chijiro walked through the camp silently, neither willing to start a conversation. Chijiro was slightly nervous, seeing that the blonde was an outsider who suddenly appeared in their camp. Naruto on the other hand was tired and had no desire to lead an awkward conversation with the other ninja. He could see that the blue-haired boy was shy and timid, but the fact that he wielded a sword of the seven swordsmen must mean that he was strong. Soon they found themselves in front of a regular tent and Naruto sighed, glad that he would finally get some rest. This is where you will be staying while you're in the camp, Chijiro said. New clothes will be brought to you in the morning when you will be summoned to meet with Mei-sama. Naruto gave him a small nod. Thanks. Chijiro returned the nod and turned around to leave while Naruto entered the tent. Inside was small but comfortable, with a single bed, a nightstand, small desk and a cupboard with a water basin and a mirror above it. He unstrapped his sword and took off his clothes before sitting on the bed with the sword in his hands. Now that he was finally alone, he decided to study it a little better. The craftsmanship of the blade was impeccable and the metal used was both sturdy and chakra conductive. For its size, it was fairly light and easy to maneuver. Naruto grumbled as he realized that he had to adjust his style again. So will you finally tell me who you are? Naruto gasped in surprise as he heard the same feminine voice again. So it wasn't my imagination. Nope, it wasn't, the same voice replied. You can hear my thoughts? Naruto asked, his eyes wide. Yup. Now stop beating around the bush and answer my damn question. The voice said heatedly. And what did you do to Kushi-chan? I am Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto replied. And Kushina. My mother is dead. The gasp of shock was heard from the voice. No. How did it happen? She died during the Kyuubi attack, Naruto replied remorsefully, the thought of his mother still hurts. The voice stayed silent for a minute before speaking again. How did you get in possession of me? A friend of mine found you in the rubble of my parents' house and gave you to me, Naruto replied. You were only a tanto though. That was my sealed form, the voice said. Since you managed to unseal me, it must mean you are worthy of wielding me. And since you're Kushina's son, I'll put my trust in you. Yeah, thanks, Naruto said. Don't make me regret it, boy, the voice said with a hint of danger. I won't. I promise, Naruto replied seriously, fully intending to keep that promise. So what's your name? I'll tell you later, the voice said. If you prove yourself worthy though. I guess that's fair, Naruto said with a sigh. Good. We'll talk again later, the voice said. I need some time alone now. Yeah, sure, Naruto replied, but the voice wasn't heard again. With a sigh, he put the sword aside and lay down on the bed. This was becoming really troublesome. He closed his eyes and waited for sleep to claim him. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. If you want the next part of this video, turn on that bell notification. Like, subscribe and comment down below. And also check out the others videos I have created and enjoyed it. See you guys next video.